Thanks to Baron of Dice, Grey Matter Gaming, and Monument Hobbies for sponsoring this video.
After only 6 months following the release of Pariah Nexus and a host of updates to how movement and line of sight work, Games Workshop has issued another massive update. This time, with an eye towards faction balance. If that mid-2024 update was a 10.5 edition, then consider this something like 10.6. Fewer core rule changes, but a lot of faction updates. In this video, we'll be looking at the 10 biggest changes from the December 2024 Dataslate and Munitorum Field Manual, and talking about what they mean for their factions and your games. We're not covering everything. If you want to get a comprehensive read of the changes, head on over to goonhammer.com for deep dives into the changes for each faction. Number 1. Deep Strike changes. Whether you have the ability from a stratagem or your datasheet, units can no longer be set up on the battlefield within 6 inches of enemy models when arriving from Deep Strike. All stratagems, which allow a unit to deep strike more than 3 inches horizontally away from an enemy unit, have been changed to 6 inches in the relevant factions. And while this opens the door for datasheets to allow this ability, Inceptor Squads and Tempestus Aquilons received similar changes to their special abilities. In addition, Inceptor Squads and Tempestus Aquilons both received changes to their Deep Strike abilities that limit their use to your movement phase, meaning they can't be combined with the Rapid Ingress stratagem. This is a big blow to every detachment or datasheet with access to this ability. In particular, it hurts Necrons, Grey Knights, Tau, Astra Militarum, and Chaos Demons, who could all make regular use of this ability. If you're playing against those armies, however, you can breathe a sigh of relief, as this eases the pressure on your backfield substantially, as well as making your glass cannon infantry choices a bit safer to play with. It's also much easier to screen deep striking units off objective with a small number of models. Number 2, AP reduction stratagems. Stratagems which worsen the AP of incoming attacks now only last until the attacking unit has finished making its attacks. They no longer last until the end of the phase. This is a big change that dramatically worsens those stratagems. It's a big hit to Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, and Grey Knight armies, who had similar stratagems in nearly every one of their detachments. These stratagems still have some value, though that value will be much more limited to situations where you need to shrug off a single unit's attacks. This also makes it harder to stack effects like Armor of Contempt and Smokescreen effectively. The big winners here? AP-1 weapons, especially those that can ignore cover, like Heavy Flamers and Plague Spitters. Heavy Bolters, Autocannons, and even the humble Astartes Chainsword look a lot more appealing when you can't trivially shrug off their armor-piercing qualities for an entire phase. Number 3. Sisters of Battle Miracle Dice. Acts of Faith and Miracle Dice are one of the game's strongest mechanics, allowing players to circumvent the standard variance inherent in rolling dice by using the values of dice rolled earlier from their Miracle Dice pool. This new update substantially reduces the number of Miracle Dice gained by Sisters armies during a game. Specifically, Sisters players now only generate 1 Miracle Dice at the end of a phase in which an Adepta Sororitas unit was destroyed, instead of 1 for each unit destroyed. Additionally, the Triumph of St. Catherine no longer gives you an extra Miracle Dice with a value of 6, but instead changes the die you gain at the start of each battle round to be a 6. This is a pretty big nerf for a faction who tend to rely on Miracle Dice to push through big results with weapons like Multi-Meltas. Losing a small number of cheap units could often result in a large pool of dice to work with in the following turn, making it easier for Sisters players to catch up and put out massive damage. Number 4, Genestealer Cults, Cult Ambush. The Cult Ambush rule has been a long-standing problem for the Genestealer Cults faction and its competitive balance. It's hard to come up with the right points cost for a unit when it has a variable chance of coming back to the table after it's been destroyed. The result was players paying a premium in points and often seeing that premium go to waste when their units didn't come back. This new update changes the Cult Ambush rule with a new mechanic. If you're playing Genestealer Cult, you get a number of Resurgence points based on the battle size. Incursion, 6 points, Strike Force, 10, and Onslaught, 14. Each time one of your units is destroyed, you can spend your Resurgence points to put an identical copy of that dead unit back into reserves, and place a Cult Ambush marker on the table more than 9 inches away from enemy units. Cult Ambush markers are now 32 millimeters in diameter. How many points your unit costs depends on the size and value of the unit. This can be anywhere from 2 points for a 5 model Acolyte Hybrids unit, up to 8 points for a 10 model unit of aberrants. On the whole, this makes the Genestealer cults much more predictable to play, and we suspect the army will feel better to play for players on both sides of the table. It's not necessarily a nerf, but this change will make it easier to effectively balance the army in the future without sacrificing the flavor of having units come back. Number 5. Orcs. Waaagh. The Orcs' waaagh ability is a key part of their playstyle, supercharging the entire army for a turn. This update changes the timing of the waaagh. You now call in a waaagh in your command phase, not at the start of the battle round, and it lasts until your next command phase. This isn't a huge buff, but it does make the waaagh easier to use. You can now wait until it's your turn to throw it out, allowing you to catch an opponent off guard more easily if you're going second. It changes the ability from an often defensive buff into more of an offensive ability, as you'll always be using it in your go turn, and then reaping the defensive benefits afterward. This means if you're going second, your opponent can't easily move, block, or run away in anticipation of your waaagh, which gives you the opportunity to get the jump on them. Number 6. Space Marines. Oath of Moment. One of the big challenges around balancing Space Marines in 10th edition was the problem of non-codex chapters. Chapters like Dark Angels and Space Wolves can access the standard detachments in Codex Space Marines as well as their own. They effectively acted as better versions of the Space Marines army, able to use the standard Space Marine rules plus their own powerful add-on units. This felt pretty bad if you weren't interested in playing one of those special chapters. This update includes changes to the Oath of Moment army rule. Now, if your army doesn't contain any Black Templars, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Death Watch, or Space Wolf units, your units get +1 to wound when making an attack targeting their Oath of Moment target. This is a powerful update that makes standard Marines much better, particularly when it comes to punching up against heavier threats and armor. It's a solid buff. When combined with some other changes to the Codex compliant chapters, this will make the chapters much more playable. Number 7, Space Marines datasheet upgrades. In addition to the changes to Oath of Moment, a large number of Space Marine datasheets were changed in this update. This includes everything from weapon profiles, such as heavy bolt rifles becoming damage 2, to unit abilities, where Intercessor squads gain a new ability, letting its models gain an additional 2 shots each when firing at a single target. The most notable of these abilities is the new Inspiring Commander abilities for the chapter characters, Lysander, Pharos, Shrike, Khan, Cantor, and Vulcan. These abilities give specific units in your army additional OC while they're not battle shocked. And while this doesn't make them battle line, it is a great bonus and a good way to incentivize you to, say, bring an entire army of Terminators with Lysander, or Outriders with Corsaro Khan. Guilliman was left out of this particular party, but he gained his own upgrade and is now able to select 2 of his Author of the Codex abilities per battle round. Number 8, Dark Angels. Company of Hunters and datasheet upgrade. The Dark Angels Company of Hunters detachment is meant to benefit Ravenwing players, but has always played second fiddle to the Space Marines Stormlance Task Force detachment. This update improves the detachment, giving mounted units the abilities to shoot and charge after advancing or falling back, bringing it in line with the Stormlance Task Force for mounted units, but not jump packs. In addition to this, the Mounted Strategist enhancement has been updated to allow the Bearer's unit to reroll advance and charge rolls, though this isn't worth quite as many points. Similar to other Space Marines, Dark Angels received some datasheet buffs as well. Ravenwing Black Knights now have devastating wounds on their close combat weapons. Samael gives his units +1 to advance and charge rolls if they could already advance and charge. And Lionel Johnson's sweep attack is now damage 2. Also, Outriders across the board become damage 2 after the charge, making them much better as Ravenwing units. Number 9, Death Guard Mortarion. Mortarion suffered greatly in 10th edition due to the lack of the deep strike rule, always having to arrive from a board edge if placed in reserves. This never made sense, and now has been corrected. Mortarion now has the deep strike rule and can drop onto the table ready to spread disease from 9 inches away. Number 10, Tyranids, Assimilation Swarm Detachment. This update includes a pair of significant buffs to the Tyranids Assimilation Swarm Detachment. The first is that healing a unit via the Feed the Swarm Detachment rule no longer requires your unit to be within range of an objective marker you control, making this ability much more useful and playable from anywhere on the board. Additionally, Norn Assimilators have been given the Harvester keyword, making them potentially a key part of this army and fixing an odd flavor mistake. And that wraps up our look at the 10 biggest changes this time around. We've covered the major bases here, but there's a ton more to cover. So head on over to goonhammer.com and read our articles for a more comprehensive look at things, as well as write-ups for every detachment. And if you have a moment, consider supporting us on Patreon via the link below. Putting out multiple videos and articles every day about these new rules requires a massive amount of time and work, and it's only made possible by your support. In addition to supporting great content, your contributions will also get you ad-free access to the site, special features in Administratum and tabletop battles, and early access to cool stuff like tickets and video content. Plus, you can hang out with us in the Goonhammer Discord. I've been Andrew Haywood, welcoming you to 10.6th edition.